My name is Eliza, and I thought I had it all figured out. At 30, I was married to the love of my life, Michael, and we lived in this cozy, though tiny apartment in one of the city's most sought-after areas. This place, with its quaint charm and memories, was a gift from my late grandmother. Michael and I were like two peas in a pod. He worked in finance, always dressed in those sharp suits that made him look so handsome. I worked in marketing, a job I loved for its creativity and pace. We were the perfect team, or so I thought. One lazy Sunday morning, as we were having breakfast, Michael brought up the topic of family, a conversation we had danced around for a while. "Eliza, I've been thinking," Michael began, his eyes serious, "about us, about starting a family." I felt a flutter in my heart. "Really? That's great. I've always dreamed of a big family," I replied, my voice filled with excitement. Michael smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I want that too, but let's wait until we have a bigger place. This apartment is too small for a family." I nodded, though a part of me felt a bit disappointed. "You're right. It makes sense. We should sell this place first, right?" "Exactly," he said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "Once we sell your grandmother's apartment, we can buy a house big enough for, say, 3 or 4 kids?" I laughed. 4 kids? That's a mini army. The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that, but I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. It was like a small cloud on a sunny day. Family gatherings were a big thing in Michael's family. His parents, Robert and Martha, were the warmest people you'd ever meet. They welcomed me into their family with open arms. Then there was Alex, Michael's younger brother, who was married to Sarah. They had 2 adorable kids, but Sarah and I never clicked. She was always a bit cold and distant, and sometimes downright rude. During one such family gathering at Michael's parents' house, she made a snide remark about my cooking. "Eliza, maybe you should stick to marketing and leave the cooking to us homemakers," she said, a fake smile plastered on her face. I remember feeling my cheeks burn with embarrassment. Michael jumped in, trying to lighten the mood. "Hey, I love Eliza's cooking, right, Dad?" he said, looking at his father, who nodded in agreement. The evening passed with more awkward moments, but I tried to brush them off. I loved Michael, and I was determined to make things work, even with Sarah. As we lay in bed that night, I turned to Michael. "Do you think Sarah doesn't like me?" Michael, already half asleep, murmured, "Don't worry about her. You're amazing, and that's all that matters." I wanted to believe him, I really did. But deep down, I knew that things were not as perfect as they seemed. And little did I know, my world was about to turn upside down. A few weeks had passed since that conversation with Michael about starting a family. The idea of waiting for a bigger home had settled in my mind, though I still held on to the dream of a large family. It was a chilly December morning, and I was tidying up the apartment while Michael was at work. I decided to clean out the coat closet. It was overflowing with jackets and coats we hardly wore. As I was going through Michael's coats, I felt something in the pocket of his winter jacket. Curious, I pulled it out. It was a receipt. At first, I thought it was just another receipt for coffee or something mundane, but this was different. It was a receipt for a scarlet-colored designer bag from a high-end store known for its romantic gifts. My heart skipped a beat. Could this be for me? I wondered aloud, a smile spreading across my face. Michael had never been the type to splurge on extravagant gifts, but maybe this was his way of showing his love, especially with Christmas just around the corner. That evening, when Michael came home, I decided not to mention the receipt. I wanted to act surprised when he gave me the gift. We sat down for dinner, and I couldn't help but feel a bit giddy. "Michael, what are we doing for Christmas?" I asked casually. He looked up from his plate. "Oh, the usual. Dinner at my parents'. Why, you got something special in mind?" I shook my head. No, just the usual sounds perfect. The days leading up to Christmas were busy with work and preparations for the holidays. But that receipt stayed in the back of my mind. I imagined how that scarlet bag would look with my New Year's outfit. Finally, it was Christmas Eve. We were at Michael's parents' house, the whole family buzzing with festive cheer. Presents were piled under the tree, and I kept sneaking glances at them, trying to spot a bag-shaped gift. Eliza, can you help me with the dessert? Martha, Michael's mom, called out from the kitchen. Of course, Martha. Be right there, I replied, happy to lend a hand. As I helped her with the pie, I mentioned the gift. Michael's been acting a bit secretive. I think he's planning a surprise for me. Martha smiled. That boy always has something up his sleeve. You're good for him, Eliza. The time came to open the gifts. My heart raced as Michael handed me a medium-sized, neatly wrapped box. It didn't feel like a bag, but maybe. I tore open the wrapping paper to find a set of beautiful porcelain dishes. I looked up at Michael, confused. Surprise! I know you've been wanting a new set for when we host dinners, he said, smiling. I forced a smile. They're lovely, Michael. Thank you. But inside, I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me. Where was the scarlet bag? Why did he buy it if not for me? The Christmas dinner at Michael's parents' house was in full swing. The house was filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the warm glow of holiday lights. I tried my best to push the thoughts of the scarlet bag out of my mind and focus on the festivities. Eliza, could you pass the gravy? Alex, Michael's brother, asked from across the table. Sure, here you go, I replied, passing the gravy boat down the table. Michael's parents were beaming, happy to have their family around them. His mother, Martha, always went all out for Christmas, and this year was no exception. The dinner was delicious, and everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. After dinner, we all moved to the living room for the gift exchange. I watched as Michael's nieces tore open their presents with glee, their faces lighting up with each new toy they uncovered. It wasn't until we were getting ready to leave that I noticed something that made my heart stop. There, slung over Sarah's shoulder, was a striking scarlet-colored designer handbag. It was unmistakable, the very same bag from the receipt I had found in Michael's coat. My mind raced as we said our goodbyes. I couldn't take my eyes off that bag. It was more than just a purse. It was a symbol of something hidden, something unspoken. On the drive home, the car was filled with an uneasy silence. Michael seemed oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. As the city lights passed by, my mind replayed the evening, but this time I saw it through a different lens. I remembered the fleeting glances that Michael and Sarah had exchanged throughout the night. They were subtle, almost imperceptible, but now they seemed glaringly obvious. The way their eyes met across the room, the brief smiles, the quick, hushed conversations when they thought no one was looking. Is everything okay, Eliza? You've been awfully quiet. Michael's voice broke through my thoughts. I turned to look at him, 1,000 questions on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't bring myself to voice any of them, not yet. I'm just a bit tired, that's all, I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. The rest of the drive home was spent in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. As we lay in bed that night, I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal creeping in. The man I loved, the life we had built together, suddenly everything seemed like a fragile facade, ready to crumble at any moment. In the days that followed Christmas, my mind was in turmoil, haunted by the sight of Sarah with that scarlet designer handbag and the subtle glances exchanged between her and my husband, Michael. The nagging feeling in my gut told me something wasn't right. One cold evening, as Michael sat idly flipping through TV channels, I decided to confront him. Michael, can we talk? It's about the bag, I said, my voice betraying a hint of nervousness. He looked at me with a casual expression. What about it? I just helped Alex pick out a surprise for her, that's all. I took a deep breath. I found the receipt, Michael. It was in your coat. Why didn't you tell me? He let out a small laugh, trying to wave it off. Oh, that. It was just a favor for Alex. You're thinking too much into it, Eliza. His response did little to soothe my suspicions. Later that night, as Michael lay asleep, I mustered up the courage to look through his phone. My heart pounded as I scrolled through his messages and stumbled upon a thread that would change everything. The conversation between Michael and Sarah was not just flirty. It was intimate, revealing a deep and long-standing affair. But the true shock came when I read a message where they discussed the biggest secret of all. Alex's children were actually Michael's. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. My husband had been in a relationship with his brother's wife, and the children I'd come to adore as my nephews were in fact my stepchildren. I felt sick to my stomach as I read message after message. They spoke of love, of a future together, and, most shockingly, of convincing me to sell the apartment and move the money to a joint account. Tears streamed down my face as the magnitude of the betrayal sank in. I was quick to screenshot the messages, sending them to my email for safekeeping. With a heavy heart, I deleted any trace of my actions from his phone and lay back, my mind spinning with the enormity of the deception. The next morning, I played the part of the unsuspecting wife. Over breakfast, Michael brought up selling our apartment, a conversation we'd had previously. "So, what do you think about the sale? It could be a good move for us." I nodded, my mind racing with plans of my own. "Yes, let's sell it. It's time for a new beginning," I replied, my voice steady despite the chaos within. He smiled, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. That's my girl, always so decisive. Little did he know, I was thinking about my future, but it was a future that was starting to look very different from the one we had planned together. Armed with the bitter truth about Michael's affair and the shock of his betrayal, I knew I needed to act smartly and swiftly. I put on a mask of normalcy in front of Michael while planning my next steps. A few days later, I made an appointment with a lawyer, Mrs. Jenkins, a recommendation from a close friend. Sitting in her office, I felt a mix of nervousness and determination. "Mrs. Jenkins, I have proof of my husband's infidelity, and it's not just any affair. He's been involved with his brother's wife, and their children are actually his," I explained, my voice trembling slightly. Mrs. Jenkins listened intently, her expression serious. "I'm sorry you're going through this, Eliza. Let's go over the evidence you have. We need to plan your next steps carefully." I showed her the screenshots of the messages between Michael and Sarah. She took notes, nodding her head thoughtfully. "This is quite damning evidence. We can use this in your favor, especially in terms of the financial settlement," Mrs. Jenkins said. "However, I advise discretion until we have everything in place. Are you prepared to go through with a divorce?" "Yes, I am. I can't be with someone who's betrayed me like this," I replied, a sense of resolve building within me. Mrs. Jenkins outlined a plan. First, we'd secure my financial assets, especially the money from the apartment sale. Then, we'd proceed with filing for divorce, using the evidence to negotiate a favorable settlement. As I left her office, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. There was a long road ahead, but I was ready to take it. Back at home, I continued to act as if everything was normal. Michael, oblivious to my discovery and the impending storm, was focused on the apartment sale. "So, I talked to a real estate agent today. He said we could get a good price for the apartment," Michael said one evening over dinner. "That's great news," I replied, keeping my emotions in check. "Do you think it's a good time to put it on the market?" "Absolutely. The sooner we sell, the sooner we can start looking for a new place," he said, unaware of the irony in his words. As the days passed, I worked closely with Mrs. Jenkins, preparing all the necessary documents and securing my financial position. Every conversation with Michael, every smile, was a performance. But it was a performance I needed to maintain a little longer until everything was ready. The day we listed the apartment for sale, Michael was ecstatic. "This is it, Eliza, our new beginning." Little did he know, it was indeed the beginning of something new, but not the future he envisioned. My heart ached with the pain of betrayal, but I was determined to come out of this stronger. The plot I was weaving wasn't just for retribution, it was for my independence and a fresh start. As the new year approached, the plans I had been carefully laying with Mrs. Jenkins were coming together. My facade of normalcy with Michael remained intact, even as my heart grew heavier each day. The final act of my plan was set to unfold during the New Year's Eve party at Michael's parents' house. It was there that I would reveal everything. The evening of the party arrived, and the house was buzzing with the usual festive cheer. Michael's parents had outdone themselves with decorations, and the air was filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. I mingled with the family, all the while feeling like I was in the eye of a storm. Michael was in high spirits, completely unaware of what was about to happen. "Eliza, you seem a bit quiet tonight. Everything okay?" Michael asked as we found a moment alone in the kitchen. Just thinking about the new year and all the changes it'll bring, I said, my voice steady. He smiled and wrapped his arm around me. It's going to be our best year yet. If only he knew. As midnight approached, everyone gathered around with glasses in hand, ready to count down to the new year. I took a deep breath, knowing that my moment was near. As the clock struck 12 and everyone cheered, I turned to Michael. Before we celebrate too much, I have a special gift for you, I said, my voice loud enough for everyone to hear. I handed him a small, neatly wrapped box. The room quieted as all eyes turned to us. Michael, looking surprised, unwrapped the box. Inside were the divorce papers and a printout of the messages I had found on his phone. His face drained of color as he realized what they were. "What is this, Eliza?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "It's over, Michael. I know about you and Sarah. I know about everything," I said, my voice clear and strong. The room erupted into chaos. Michael's parents looked shocked, his brother Alex was speechless, and Sarah, who had been standing near the back, looked like she might faint. "What are you talking about, Eliza?" Michael's mother asked, confusion and concern in her voice. "Michael has been having an affair with Sarah, and her children are his," I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Michael tried to speak, but no words came out. Sarah started crying, and Alex, who had been silent up until now, turned to his brother. "Is this true, Michael? Tell me this isn't true." Alex's voice was filled with a mix of anger and disbelief. Michael couldn't meet his brother's eyes. The truth was out there for everyone to see, and there was no escaping it. The revelation at the New Year's Eve party sent shockwaves through the room. Michael's family, once a picture of unity and joy, was now a scene of chaos and disbelief. The truth about Michael's affair with Sarah and their plan to embezzle the money from my apartment sale was out, and the reactions were immediate and intense. Michael's mother, Martha, looked at him with a mix of disbelief and heartbreak. "Michael, how could you? And with Sarah? To think you were planning to steal from Eliza and run away?" Before Michael could respond, I added, "And it's not just the affair. They were planning to use the money from the sale of my apartment to leave the country." The room went silent. The gravity of the betrayal hung heavy in the air. Then, Martha, overcome with emotion, fainted, causing a stir as family members rushed to her side. Michael stood there, looking lost and defeated. His father, Robert, shook his head in disgust. "I can't believe you would do this to your own family, to your own brother." Alex, who had been silent, his face a mask of shock and hurt, finally spoke. "Michael, I don't even know who you are anymore." Sarah was sobbing uncontrollably, her tears doing little to garner any sympathy. The family was too stunned and hurt by the depth of their deceit. With Martha being attended to and the room in disarray, I knew this was my moment to make my stand. I raised my voice, ensuring everyone heard me clearly. "I am filing for divorce from Michael, and I won't just stop there. I will be seeking financial compensation for this betrayal, from both Michael and Sarah." The words felt empowering to say out loud. It was a declaration of my independence and my refusal to be a victim of their selfishness. Michael tried to approach me, a look of desperation in his eyes. "Eliza, please, let me explain." I held up my hand to stop him. "There's nothing you can say to justify what you've done. You and Sarah have made your choices. Now, you'll have to live with the consequences." The months following the New Year's Eve revelation were a whirlwind. The divorce proceedings were tough, but with each passing day, I felt a sense of liberation growing within me. I was no longer bound to a relationship built on lies and deceit. One sunny afternoon, after finalizing the last of the divorce papers, I sat in a cafe, a cup of coffee in hand, reflecting on the journey I had been through. "You look like you're a million miles away," my friend Clara said as she joined me at the table. "Just thinking about everything that's happened," I replied, offering a small smile. "You've handled it all with such grace, Eliza. I'm proud of you," she said, her eyes full of genuine sympathy. "Thanks, Clara. It wasn't easy, but I feel like I can finally start fresh now," I said, feeling the weight of the past months lift off my shoulders. With the divorce settled, I had kept the apartment and received a significant financial settlement from Michael. As for him, His reputation had taken a severe hit, and he lost his job due to the scandal. Sarah and Alex had also gone their separate ways, with the family ties deeply strained. "I heard Michael moved out of the city," Clara mentioned, stirring her coffee. "Yes, he did. And honestly, I'm relieved. It's easier to move on knowing he's not around," I admitted. "And what's next for Eliza?" Clara asked, a hint of excitement in her voice. I thought for a moment. "I want to focus on myself for a while. Maybe travel, pick up some hobbies that I've been neglecting, and who knows, perhaps even start dating again when I'm ready." "That sounds wonderful. You deserve all the happiness in the world," she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. As we chatted and laughed, I felt a sense of hope for the future. The pain of the past was still there, a faint scar on my heart, but it no longer defined me. I had emerged stronger and more self-assured. The story of my marriage and its dramatic end would always be a part of me, but it was now just that, a part of my past. Ahead of me lay a path filled with new possibilities and opportunities for growth and happiness. It was the end of one chapter, but the beginning of something new, something entirely my own. A fresh start, a new beginning, and a life that I was ready to embrace fully.
I'm Anna, and this story isn't just mine. It's about the life I shared with Michael, my husband, and how everything we built together slowly unraveled. We met in college, two dreamers with ambitions as high as the stars. Michael was the kind of guy who could light up a room with his laugh, simple yet charming, always with a kind word for everyone. We fell in love, graduated, and, as luck would have it, started our careers at the same company. Life was good, simple, and blissfully happy. Our evenings were the highlight of my days. We'd come home, cook together, and share stories about our work. Michael was a good listener, always interested in my day, my ideas. He was supportive, proud of our equal standing at work, our shared ambitions. "Anna, you're amazing at what you do," he'd say with a smile. "I love that we're in this together." But then, everything changed when Michael got promoted. It was a significant achievement, and initially, I was overjoyed. But with the promotion came a change I hadn't anticipated. Michael started to care more about appearances, about status. He wasn't the same man I'd fallen in love with. Slowly, his criticism began. First, it was subtle, a comment here or there. "Why do we always eat the same meals? We can afford better now," he'd remark, pushing his plate away. I tried to adapt, to please him, but nothing seemed good enough. He began to critique my clothing, my shopping choices, even how I decorated our home. "Why do you always buy the cheapest brands? We're not college students anymore, Anna," he'd say, his voice laced with annoyance. I felt a growing distance between us, a chasm that I didn't know how to bridge. The man I loved, who once found joy in our simple life, was now obsessed with wealth and status. One evening, after I returned from grocery shopping with more budget-friendly items, Michael's frustration boiled over. "Anna, this isn't acceptable. You're still dressing and shopping like we're on a tight budget. You don't match my status," he said coldly, his words cutting through me like a knife. His words lingered in the air, marking the end of our simple, happy days. That was the moment I realized how much he had changed, how much our life had diverged from the path we once walked together. It was the beginning of the end, the start of a journey I never expected to take. As days turned into weeks, the strain in our relationship only deepened. Michael's constant critiques about how I didn't match his status weighed heavily on me. I missed the man he used to be, the one who found joy in our simple life together. But as his obsession with wealth and appearances grew, our connection continued to fade. In the midst of this growing distance, life threw us a curveball. I discovered I was pregnant. The news brought a mix of emotions, joy, fear, and a glimmer of hope that this might bring us back together. Michael's reaction to the pregnancy was surprisingly warm. His face, which had been etched with dissatisfaction for so long, lit up when I told him. Really? We're going to have a baby? He exclaimed, his voice filled with an excitement I hadn't heard in ages. For the first time in months, I saw a spark of the old Michael. During my pregnancy, he was attentive and caring, often checking in on me and ensuring I was comfortable. It felt like a breath of fresh air, a brief return to the days when we were a team. When our son, David, was born, Michael's joy was palpable. Holding David for the first time, he looked at me with tears in his eyes. "He's perfect, Anna. We made this beautiful boy," he said, his voice choked with emotion. The early days with David were a blur of sleepless nights and new routines, but they were also filled with moments of tenderness and joy. Michael, despite his busy schedule, tried to be there for David's first milestones. Watching him with our son, I saw glimpses of the man I had fallen in love with. With David's arrival, our relationship found a temporary peace. The arguments and criticisms subsided, replaced by shared moments of wonder over our son. It was as if David's presence healed some of the fractures in our marriage. I cherished this period, hoping it would last, that maybe this was the turning point we needed. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just a brief respite, a calm before another storm. For now, though, I held on to the hope that our family could find its way back to the happiness we once knew. Life with a newborn was a whirlwind, and for a while, it seemed to bridge the gap between Michael and me. But as David grew and the novelty of new fatherhood faded for Michael, the old patterns began to resurface. Michael's work consumed him more than ever, and when he was home, his attention was more focused on showing off David than actually bonding with him. He would buy our son the most expensive toys and clothes, things a toddler would never appreciate. One evening, I found Michael online, browsing through a list of elite preschools. He didn't even look up as I entered the room. "Anna, I'm thinking of enrolling David in St. James Academy. It's the best in the city," he said, not asking but telling. I sat beside him, trying to keep my voice calm. "Michael, he's just 2. Do we really need to send him to such an expensive school?" He finally looked at me, his expression one of disbelief. "Of course, we do. He's my son. He deserves the best." "But he needs time to be a kid, Michael. Love and attention, not just the most expensive things," I argued, feeling a familiar frustration. Michael shook his head, dismissing my concerns. "You don't understand, Anna. It's about giving him opportunities I never had." This was our new normal. Conversations turned into debates, and debates into arguments. It felt like we were speaking different languages. I longed for the days when our dreams and values aligned. The distance between us wasn't just emotional, it became physical. Michael often returned late from work, long after David and I had dinner. One night, when he came home at an ungodly hour, I couldn't hold back my frustration. "Michael, it's past midnight. You missed dinner again? David asked about you," I said, my voice laced with exhaustion. He shrugged off his coat, weary yet indifferent. "I'm the head of the department now, Anna. These late nights are just part of the job." "But what about us, Michael? What about your family?" I pleaded, hoping to reach some part of the man I married. He paused, his face a mix of fatigue and annoyance. "I'm doing all this for our family, Anna. You and David are living comfortably because of my hard work." I wanted to argue, to tell him that comfort wasn't just about money, but I was too tired. It was the same argument, and I knew I couldn't change his mind. As I lay in bed that night, listening to the faint clicks of his laptop from the other room, I realized that our little family was drifting apart. My husband, once my partner in every aspect of life, was now a stranger living under the same roof, connected only by a shared past and a son who deserved better than this growing void between his parents. It was during one of those long, silent evenings that I made a decision. I needed to go back to work, to find a piece of the woman I used to be before the distance with Michael grew too vast. The perfect opportunity came when a position opened up at my old company, the same place where Michael and I had started our journey together. Feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement, I decided to broach the subject with Michael. "Michael, I've been thinking of going back to work. There's an opening in my old department," I said, hoping for his support. His reaction was immediate and strong. "Go back to work? Why would you need to do that? I'm making more than enough for both of us," he replied, barely looking up from his laptop. I tried to explain. "It's not about the money, Michael. It's about me, about feeling like I'm contributing, being part of a team again." Michael finally looked at me, his expression one of disapproval. "You can contribute by taking care of David and the house. That's your team now." I couldn't hide my frustration. "But I need more than that. I want to use my skills, feel professional achievement again. Besides, it's good for David to see both his parents working." Michael stood up, his voice rising. "You going back to work, especially at my company, is not a good idea. What will people think? That I can't provide for my family?" I was taken aback by his attitude. "So this is about your image, your status?" He ignored my question and continued. "Look at yourself, Anna. You've changed. You've let yourself go since having David." His words were like a slap in the face. I felt my cheeks burning with a mix of anger and hurt. "What do you mean, I've let myself go?" "You know what I mean. You've gained weight. You hardly take care of yourself. It's not a good look, especially not for the wife of a department head," he said, his tone cold and detached. I was speechless, my heart pounding in my chest. The man who once loved me for who I was now stood there, criticizing my appearance, my worth. "And frankly," he added, his words cutting deeper, "I would be embarrassed to have you working at the company looking like this. I will be ashamed at work for such an ugly wife." I stood there, frozen, as he walked out of the room. His words echoed in my mind, a cruel reminder of how far we had drifted apart. That night, I lay awake, Michael's words replaying over and over. It was clear now. The man I married, the man I loved, was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. The days following Michael's harsh critique were some of the loneliest I had ever experienced. His words had cut deep, leaving me to question not just our relationship, but my self-worth. In the midst of this turmoil, an unexpected incident occurred that changed everything. It was a typical Thursday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a delivery man holding a large, extravagant bouquet of flowers. Confused, I accepted the bouquet and the accompanying card, thinking maybe Michael was attempting an awkward apology. But as I opened the card, my heart sank. The words were like a punch to the gut. "To the most beautiful and perfect woman in the world, with the most charming youth and slender waist, which can be embraced with 2 hands." The words mocked me, a stark contrast to what Michael had said just days before. I felt a mix of anger and humiliation wash over me. This wasn't for me. It couldn't be. It was then I noticed the mistake in the address. The bouquet was meant for someone else. As I stood there trying to process this, my phone rang. It was Michael's new secretary, a young girl who had just started working for him. Michael had mentioned her once, laughing about how she was still studying and often mixed things up. "Mrs. Smith, I'm so sorry. I think I've made a terrible mistake," she said, her voice anxious. "What mistake?" I asked, though I already had an idea. "The flowers. They were meant for someone else." "I'm so sorry. I sent them to the wrong address," she admitted, sounding flustered. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "Who were they meant for?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The secretary hesitated. I don't know her name. I'm just asked to send flowers and gifts sometimes. Please don't tell Mr. Smith I called." After we hung up, I stood in the middle of the living room, the unfaithful bouquet mocking me from the table. The realization of Michael's betrayal hit me hard. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. Without a second thought, I packed a bag for myself and David. I grabbed some of his favorite toys, his clothes, and the essentials. I couldn't stay in that house a moment longer, surrounded by the life I thought we had, which now felt like a lie. I left a note for Michael on the kitchen counter. I didn't wait for him to come home to offer excuses or explanations. I took David, who was confused but excited for an impromptu visit to Auntie's house, and left. Driving to my sister's place, I felt a strange mix of relief and heartache. The life I had known was crumbling, but I knew I needed to get away, to find some space to think and to protect David from the fallout. That evening, as I sat in my sister's living room, lost in thought, Michael showed up unexpectedly. He looked frantic, a stark contrast to his usual composed self. "Anna, why did you leave? Why did you take David?" he asked, his voice tinged with a mix of concern and anger. I confronted him directly. "Why? Maybe because of the bouquet sent to your mistress, mistakenly delivered to your wife," I said, my voice steady but filled with hurt. Michael's face fell. That was a misunderstanding. The secretary, she made a mistake. I swear, there's nothing going on." I looked at him, trying to find a hint of the truth in his eyes, but all I saw was desperation. "A mistake? Is that your best explanation?" Before he could respond, I pulled out a packet of photos and laid them on the table. "Then how do you explain these, Michael?" His eyes widened as he looked at the photos of him with a young woman, clearly more than just colleagues. Where did you get these?" he stammered. "I hired a private detective. He's been very thorough. Did you know she's the wife of your business partner?" I asked, watching as the color drained from his face. Michael looked like he'd been punched in the gut. "You can't let these get out. It'll ruin everything," he pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt a bitter laugh escape me. "Ruin everything? What about us, Michael? What about our family?" He reached out, but I pulled away. "Anna, please, I'm begging you. Forgive me. I can fix this." But it was too late for apologies, too late for forgiveness. "Forgive you? After you've lied and cheated?" "I can't, Michael, I won't. I'm filing for divorce. And these photos, they'll ensure I get what David and I deserve." Michael looked defeated, his shoulders slumping as the reality of the situation hit him. "Anna, please." But I had made up my mind. "No, Michael, you've made your choice. Now I'm making mine." As he left, I knew that this was the end of our marriage. The evidence in my hands was more than just proof of his infidelity. It was the key to a new beginning for me and David. The road ahead would be hard, but I was determined to rebuild our lives, free from lies and betrayal. The following weeks were a blur of legal meetings and tough decisions. I had initiated the divorce proceedings, armed with the evidence of Michael's infidelity. Despite the turmoil, there was a sense of determination within me. I was fighting not just for my own dignity, but for a better future for David. One afternoon, I met with my lawyer to discuss the details of the divorce. "We have a strong case, Anna. The evidence you provided is more than enough to ensure a favorable outcome for you and David," she said, her voice confident. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. "I just want this to be over. I want to ensure that David is taken care of." My lawyer assured me, "We'll make sure of that. You'll have custody, and with Michael's position, child support won't be an issue." As the days passed, the reality of my new life began to set in. I was going to be a single mother, a role I never anticipated. But I also felt a growing sense of empowerment. I was making decisions, standing up for myself and my son. The final hearing was a tense affair. Michael and I sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, the air thick with unspoken words. When the judge granted the divorce, Citing Michael's infidelity, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was officially free from a marriage that had become a source of pain and betrayal. Outside the courtroom, Mikhail approached me. "Anna, I'm sorry. I never wanted it to end like this," he said, his voice laced with defeat. I looked at him, seeing the man I once loved, now a stranger. "It didn't have to be this way, Michael, but you made your choices." He nodded, a look of resignation on his face. "I just hope one day you can forgive me, for David's sake." I took a deep breath. "I'll always do what's best for David, but as for us, there's nothing left to say." Walking away from the courthouse, I felt a sense of closure. The divorce was not just the end of my marriage, but the beginning of a new chapter. I had stood up for myself, fought for what was right, and in the end, I had come out stronger. The finalization of the divorce marked the start of a new chapter in my life. It was a time of rebuilding, not just for me, but for David as well. We had both been through so much, and now it was time to look forward to a future that was ours to shape. One sunny afternoon, as David played in my sister's backyard, I sat with her on the porch, a cup of coffee in hand. "You know, I never thought I'd be here, starting over like this," I said, watching David chase butterflies. My sister, always my rock, smiled at me. "But you're not just starting over, Anna. You're starting fresh. There's a difference. You're stronger now, more aware of what you want and don't want." I nodded, feeling the truth in her words. "Yeah, I guess you're right. It's all so overwhelming at times." She reached over, squeezing my hand. "It's going to be okay. You've got this, and you've got us, always." I smiled, grateful for her support. "Thanks. I don't know what I'd do without you." As the days turned into weeks, I began to find my footing again. I returned to work, where I was greeted with warmth and understanding. It felt good to be back, to be productive, and to engage with colleagues who respected and valued me. David, too, was adjusting. He missed his father, but we made sure he had regular visits. I wanted to ensure that, despite everything, he had a relationship with Michael. After all, whatever had happened between Michael and me, he was still David's dad. One evening, as I tucked David into bed, he looked up at me with his big, innocent eyes. "Mommy, are you happy?" he asked, his voice soft. I kissed his forehead, feeling a surge of love for my little boy. "Yes, David, I am. And I want you to always be happy too." He smiled, a sleepy, content smile. "I am, Mommy. I love you." "I love you too, sweetheart." "More than anything," I whispered, turning off his light. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the journey I had been on. I thought about the future, uncertain but promising. I had dreams to chase, a career to build, and a beautiful son to raise. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but I was ready to face it head on. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized that this wasn't just a new beginning. It was a chance to write my own story, on my own terms. And with that thought, I welcomed the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead, ready to embrace them with an open heart and a newfound strength.